Now, I'm not here to argue about other people's opinions on games because I honestly don't really care. I'm sure you've seen by now the nominees for Geoff Keighley's Game of the Year, which include Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and The Outer Worlds, which by all means are great games. Like, honestly, I've played most of these. I only didn't play Sekiro, but I've played and beaten all of the other ones, and I'm happy that they've been given a spot in the Game of the Year nominees. But you might notice one amazing game in particular that is missing from this list, which is Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, honestly, you guys, I'm sure a lot of you are angry. If you follow this channel, you're probably a Nintendo fan, but I think the reason why it's missing from this Game of the Year nomination list is simply because not a lot of games media play Fire Emblem. And if they do, they're probably a Nintendo dedicated site, which I assume isn't allowed on the voting jury, because going through the list of the jury, I don't see any sites that are Nintendo only, which I think puts Fire Emblem Three Houses at a huge disadvantage. And I know what you're thinking, this is a Nintendo site. Of course you're going to be begging for a Nintendo game on the list. Honestly, that's not it, guys. I love every game on this list. The only one I didn't play was Sekiro, but I loved all of these games. I mean, I didn't love Control, but I thought it was really good. But I honestly think that Fire Emblem is a lot better than The Outer Worlds and Control, and an argument could be made for the others on the list. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I listen to a ton of gaming podcasts, from Kinda Funny to IGN to What's Good Games to Game Informer to GameSpot, a lot of press that is on the jury for the Game Award nominations. And I noticed throughout the year, why aren't any of these sites or YouTube channels talking about Fire Emblem? And I'm noticing now, listening to the podcasts after they've all voted for the nominees, that they simply didn't vote for Fire Emblem because they either never completed it or they never played it. Which is a little strange that you're allowed to vote against a game that you haven't actually played. As long as you've played like 3 or 4 games on the list, you don't actually have to play them all to vote for something else, which I think is kind of strange. Be sure to let me know what you think about that down in the comments section below. But I honestly think that's the reason why Fire Emblem wasn't on the Game of the Year list, or even in the RPG of the Year, which boggles my mind that it's not on that list. That is just crazy. As of right now, best role-playing game can go to Disco Elysium, Final Fantasy XIV, Kingdom Hearts 3, Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and The Outer Worlds. Like I said, Fire Emblem not being on that list is a travesty, but it did actually make it on one of the lists, which is best strategy game. It's a strategy game, but I mostly put it more in the category of an RPG, and it not being on the list of RPGs is just crazy to me. But be sure to let me know what you think about that. As for strategy games, which I think it will end up winning this category, it's Age of Wonders, Planetfall, Anno 1800, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Total War Three Kingdoms, and Tropico 6. I'll be honest, I haven't even really heard of most of those aside from Fire Emblem, but to me, it just kind of seems like Fire Emblem was snubbed because not a lot of games media play the series. At least that's what I've come to realize listening to all the podcasts that I listen to. Not a lot of people have played them. Usually like 1 out of the 4 people or 3 people on the podcast have played the game, and that's just starting it, not even completing it. As for people who completed it, I was listening to IGN's podcast, and only 1 girl on the podcast even played the game, whereas everyone else, they didn't really touch it and they didn't really mess with it, even though it's truly my favorite game of the year, which I think this year has been a wonderful year. I'm going to be making a video in the coming days of my top 20 games of the year. That's going to include games on every platform. Even though this is a Nintendo dedicated site, I still wanted to give my opinions on other games out there because I play on all 3 platforms. Like I said before, I'm not just specifically playing on Nintendo, even though I love Nintendo. But be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Do you think Fire Emblem Three Houses was snubbed in Geoff Keighley's Game Awards? At the end of the day, it's just these silly Game Awards, so it's not that big a deal. But I just found it quite interesting because I've really been noticing not a lot of press have actually beaten or even played Fire Emblem, which is why I assume it wasn't nominated for much outside of Strategy Game of the Year. But really, it not being on RPG of the Year is just crazy to me. And for the end of this video, why not? I'll just throw in my Fire Emblem Three Houses review in case you haven't played the game and you might be interested in it. This is me basically gushing over it for the next 6 or 7 minutes. I don't remember how long this review is, but let's jump on into my review from earlier this year. There are a lot of moving parts to Fire Emblem Three Houses: battles, politics, relationships, and more, all working in tandem to create something truly special. Being a novice Fire Emblem player, I was a bit intimidated by the game at first. There is a lot thrown at you in the first couple of hours. However, once I started to learn the ins and out of every gameplay system Three Houses has to offer, the addictive nature of the gameplay loop sets in. If you've been following my preview coverage over the last few weeks, then some of this is retreading the same areas, but I'm happy to finally cover some things that I haven't been able to in my preview coverage. Without further ado, here's why Fire Emblem Three Houses has stolen my life over the past few weeks. At the start of the game, you'll choose one of 3 houses: the Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, or the Golden Deer. And depending on which house you choose, it'll affect how the story unfolds and who's a part of your initial group of students. One of my favorite parts of Fire Emblem Three Houses is no one who plays it will have the exact same experience. While students from your chosen house are available for battle at the start, you have the ability to recruit new students and even professors that aren't students of your house. But you'll need to build up certain stats like faith, strength, authority, and many more to win them over. Building your team into your ultimate clan of warriors is a ton of fun thanks to the amount of choice given to you. Obviously, picking one of the 3 houses mixes things up quite a bit, but the disparity between playthroughs doesn't end there. You're able to change any of your students' classes entirely and switch their focus to multiple things at once. For example, my Bernadetta could be a swordsman warrior, but yours could be an archer mage. Weapon durability returns in Fire Emblem Three Houses. You have a limited number of uses for a weapon before it breaks. Each has a set damage total, critical hit chance, and a hit chance associated with it. And whatever character you're using also affects the critical hit chance and the hit chance. Fire Emblem Three Houses loses the weapon triangle gameplay mechanic many Fire Emblem fans have grown accustomed to over the years. Instead, it focuses more on speed, power, critical hits, and dynamic placement on the battlefield. As I noted before, I'm no Fire Emblem vet. However, I have played a handful of Fire Emblem titles in the past. To be completely honest, the removal of the weapon triangle never really crossed my mind after the first few hours, but I do understand that the removal of this key feature is travesty to many fans of the series. But for me, it didn't really hinder my experience. There are a hefty amount of classes to choose from with 4 different brackets ranging from beginner to master. Whatever class a character focuses on sooner or later allows them to take a certification test to become a more advanced fighter in that class. You can actually advance early if you want to risk losing a seal, which aren't cheap at the item shop. The game actually tells you your percentage at passing a certification test. It's disappointing to fail a test, but nothing a quick game reset can't fix. When you pass, however, it's pretty darn satisfying. Sorta like evolving a Pokemon early with a stone, except with no negative repercussions. So between what house you choose, who you recruit, and how you teach your warriors, Fire Emblem Three Houses offers an insane amount of choice to the player. No one will have the exact same experience. Sure, everyone's will be similar in some fashion, but every player will go about building their own team into something unique. To add to that, Fire Emblem Three Houses does a great job at humanizing its characters. Students actually have preferences about what their role is on the battlefield. They'll come to you throughout the game and ask if they can switch their focus to a different class or multiple classes. Then it's up to you to decide whether or not you think it's for the best. Multiple times throughout my playthrough, a character would come to me and say they aren't passionate about what they're doing and they want to switch to something they're interested in. But I had to turn them down because I knew what was best for the team. And yeah, I felt bad about it. You'll notice throughout this video that Edelgard is rocking heavy armor. That's because I gave in and let her do what she wanted rather than thinking only about how she'd be more useful on the battlefield. It's things like this throughout the game that make the characters feel like actual people and not just robots that you control on the battlefield. The fact that they actually have feelings and preferences makes you grow even more attached. You'll spend a hefty amount of your time in Fire Emblem Three Houses' main hub area, the Monastery. This open segment style of gameplay is brand new to the Fire Emblem series. It's a great way to shake up the pacing of the game, giving you the chance to do side quests, which are usually just fetch quests, and many activities like one-on-one battles, choir, gardening, and more. Time in the monastery can get a bit repetitive, but I honestly didn't mind the repetition of this section of the game. The monastery is a great way to unwind and get to know your students more, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but the monastery just makes you feel all fuzzy and warm inside, like opening up presents on Christmas morning or something. I think it's a mix of the beautiful music and the fact that it's filled with characters I've grown bonds with and watched grow from students to warriors. This, of course, leads me to my next topic. One thing that has impressed me when playing Fire Emblem Three Houses is the sheer amount of dialogue in the game. With 30 plus students and teachers, there are a lot of characters with fully developed personalities and backstories. Not to mention unique voices that are almost always acted over and rarely just text. Students and professors have something new to say after pretty much every event in the game. To add to that, every character has support conversations with not only Byleth, but other characters as well. You can learn backstories and watch friendships blossom through these support conversations, many of which are either heartwarming or heartbreaking. Needless to say, Fire Emblem Three Houses leans more into characters, relationships, and side stories than ever before, and it pays off. Between the story-related dialogue, the monastery dialogue, and support conversations, there is a ton of rich stories and lore to uncover in Fire Emblem Three Houses, and the best part about it all is that they weren't just aiming for quantity, but quality as well. The game is chock full of intriguing dialogue. Intelligent Systems somehow accomplished stellar world building through still text bubble conversations. The monastery, character interactions, and side stories are half the fun of Fire Emblem Three Houses. As I mentioned in my preview coverage, Fire Emblem Three Houses character models are absolutely stunning. Along with that, special attacks feature superb animations that are a treat for the eyes. Unfortunately, those two sections of the game are the most visually pleasing parts of Three Houses. Otherwise, things don't look wonderful. That said, this is the first time the entire map is continuously loaded with 3D models and environments at all times, and you can instantly swap between traditional grid-based gameplay and a new third-person perspective. Taking that into account, the quality of the visuals is actually pretty impressive. However, the new ground floor perspective, while neat, doesn't really add much to the strategic thinking of the game, so I would have preferred to leave that option out in place of better visuals overall. And my final nitpick is the inventory system being a bit of a scattered mess. You'll constantly be backing in and out of the item screen and the storefront, which could have been better connected in the menus. I typically don't like diving deep into story details for narrative-heavy games in my reviews, and as I'm sure you know, Fire Emblem Three Houses is very story-heavy. I like to keep things as vague as possible, as even small spoilers could possibly hinder another's enjoyment of the game. What I will say is this. From the opening cutscene and forward, Three Houses never stopped surprising me, and it packs quite a dark story that caught me off guard. The game also features beautifully animated cutscenes with top-tier voice acting to go with it. I had never been so emotionally invested into a JRPG since Persona 4 Golden, and honestly, that's the highest praise it could receive from me. I have never beaten a 60-hour game and immediately wanted to jump back in for round 2. Fire Emblem Three Houses pulls you in with its rock-solid grid-based combat, but it keeps you invested by offering rich characters, deep squad customization, and an enthralling story that keeps you guessing. It's easily the best RPG of 2019 so far. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you made it this far, it really means a lot, and thank you to all the latest subscribers who joined the channel because of my Fire Emblem preview coverage. And one last thing, sorry if I sound kinda odd in this video, I'm a bit under the weather at the moment, but I just had to get this review up. Thanks a lot for watching, hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and maybe even that notifications bell if you're feeling generous. I'll talk to you guys later.